Hello quilty friends and welcome back to my channel. My name's Rachel and I make videos about quilting and my creative life, and today's video is on hand quilting because I have been asked a number of times how I hand quilt without using a hoop or a frame. And I do most of my hand quilting just on my armchair, just there behind me in the corner, and I just find it much more comfortable. I did buy a hoop when I very first started quilting. I just didn't get along with it very well, and I find that without a hoop is more suitable for big stitching. I don't do massive quilting stitches, usually around 1 centimetre long. I do try and get them smaller. I don't go for like the massive big stitching, but however, with this quilt that I'm hand quilting at the moment, I am working on getting my quilting a little bit smaller, mainly because the areas that I'm quilting in are small to begin with, so I didn't want to have huge stitches because you'd only get 1 or 2 stitches in the area. So today I will be showing you how I do my hand quilting without a hoop, without a frame, and I just find it more comfortable. You can literally sit in the same position that you would for all of your hand sewing needs, and yeah, it's more comfortable for me anyway. So I thought I would share some tips because somebody left a comment a couple of weeks ago, so thank you for your comment, asking how do I prevent any puckers on the back when I quilt without the frame. Now, because I've never quilted with a frame, I don't know how the frame would prevent the puckers on the back. I assume that you look and you stretch it out like you would do, like a piece of calico, an embroidery hoop. So before I get on with the demo, let me tell you how I prepare my quilts. So I use a combination of spray basting and pin basting because I find that neither alone is good enough. Spray basting would be okay if you was going to machine it, but I find that without the pins holding it, it doesn't have a secure bond. So when I do my pins, let me show you, see if you can see, I've got a pin there, I've got a pin there. I've been taking them out as I go, but I've got a pin there. And I generally try, when I'm basting, I have my pins sort of a hand width apart, but I try and place them where I know it's not going to interrupt with my quilting. So here I'm quilting on the white, so I haven't placed them on the white, I've put them on the colours. Sometimes that means that they're closer together or they're further apart, but that's fine. So when I do my basting, this one I actually basted on the carpet, and it was the first one that I've done on the carpet. I usually do them on the bed. The backing, I put right sides down onto the carpet, and I actually duct taped it to the carpet so I could get a really nice stretch on it. When I do it on the bed, I pin it into the bed. Terrible, I know. I use brightly coloured pins so I know that a pin doesn't go into the bed. And I use, you get those pins that are on the discs. I use a full disc and I put them all back in the disc so I know that they're all accounted for. But that just helps the back stay taut when you're basting it. And then I spray baste, I put the wadding down, and then I put the top on. And at that point I'm smoothing out, and then I do the pin basting. I peel back, spray, smooth over, put the pins in, peel back, spray, all that. There are probably plenty of videos out there on actually doing the basting, but that's how I prefer to do it. I don't like doing it on a table. I like to do it where I can put the whole quilt out and see it all in one go. And sometimes for me, the only big place that I've got to do that is on the bed. I take all the bed covers off so that it's a nice smooth surface. And then what I do after the quilt top is completely prepared, I flip it over and I look at the backing. Often there's puckers and it's not 100% smooth because there will be shifting. However, when I did it on the carpet and I duct taped it to the carpet, there was no puckers. So if there's puckers, I'll remove the pins and try and smooth it out as best as I can and just keep smoothing. But when I'm actually doing the hand quilting, I'll have it on my lap, and it might be on my lap in a bunch like this, but I have the area that I'm working on nice and smooth. So this is the square that I'm working on. And my non-dominant hand is here underneath. And all I do before I start quilting, and maybe when I change the thread, is I just feel the quilt underneath. Is there any puckers or anything? And what I'm also paying attention to is I've already quilted this section here, so just smooth it towards the outside. So if there are any puckers, you're smoothing them as you go. And there won't be any pleats or anything because you're going to check to make sure there's any pleats, but you can create puckers. There might be a little bit of shifting, so all I do is I just smooth. And when I do the demo, I am hopefully going to try and include some footage from underneath so you can see what my hand does underneath. But that's all I do really to prevent the puckers. I just constantly feel it, and if I feel that there's a crease or something major that I can't smooth out with just one smooth, I'll literally flip the quilt over, have a look, has anything shifted, and if it has, I would probably undo the pins to the edge and smooth it out, put the pins back in. Most of the pins I remove as I go, but this one I haven't removed. I think it's because it's right on the edge there in between this one, but yeah, so let's get on and I'll show you how I do this. I really enjoy hand quilting. I find it really enjoyable. This quilt will take me a little bit longer to hand quilt, not only because my stitches are smaller, but because they're going in all sorts of directions. When doing hand quilting, if you're intimidated or you think it's going to take you a long time, do stitches in one direction. So when I quilted my hexagon EPP quilt, they all went into the centre, but they were just straight stitches. So all you're doing is all the way along. So let's say I was quilting in this line here. You can just go all the way along. But what I'm having to do here with the stars is I only quilt from right to left. I can't come towards me. I can't go away from me. So I have to rotate it like this. And I just keep rotating it. And sometimes it is in a bunch like this on my lap. But I just keep rotating it. Sometimes I have to totally flip it all round, but that's why this one will take me a little bit longer. So if you haven't hand quilted before and you think I can't do that, it's going to take me too long, just try straight stitching. Obviously it's all straight stitching, but I hope you know what I mean, just in one direction, forwards, well in my case sidewards. So yeah, let me get on and show you how I hand quilt. Before I do that, I'll just touch on the thread that I'm using. So this is a Gutermann hand quilting thread. It does just say quilting on it, but when I bought it in the shop, there was a big sign saying hand quilting. And when I got to the checkout, she said, you definitely want this for hand quilting, don't you? So they must get that all the time just because it says quilting on there. And this was less than £5 for 200 metres, 220 yards. It has a little bit of like a coating, so it will have a little bit of a coil. You can literally run your nail down it though and the coil will drop out. It doesn't knot very often, and if it does knot you can just give it a little tug and the knot just totally disappears. And with this I don't run it through beeswax or anything like that. So yeah, I have hand quilted in the past with pearl 8 thread. That's fine, but that I think it does knot very easily. If you get a little knot, you can't just easily pull it out. Your knot will be there. So you probably should run that through like a thread conditioner to try and prevent those knots. And I do also quilt a lot with DMC embroidery thread, just because I have a lot of colours of it. I generally do 2 or 3 strands. Let's say if I'm hand quilting a placemat or like a nice little wall hanging, I've got so many colours. I know it's not the most durable, but it is really good for hand quilting and I do enjoy using it. And it is one of those products that you can pretty much pick up in your local haberdashery or craft store, whereas I find pearl 8 threads or pearl 12 are harder to pick up. You have to go to a specialist store or order online, and you can't always guarantee the colour match, can you? Let me show you this that I also picked up recently, because if you're hand quilting you might want to mark the quilt. I think that's a totally different video, but for marking the quilt you can actually use masking tape. So this is, it says it's 6mm, but it's near enough a 1/4 inch, and it's assorted masking tapes from Hobbycraft. This was £5 and you get lots on there. And all you can do is, let's say on this quilt I wanted to mark it, just put the masking tape on, the seam, and then your quilt on the other side of this tape, and it will give you a nice consistent edge, and you haven't got to mark anything, worry about removing the marks, the chalks and all that type of thing. I think you can get a specialist one for quilting, but I've never seen that, so this was in Hobbycraft. I'll leave the link to this in the description box if you're in the UK. I should have mentioned the needles that I've been using. I think the needle is a size 9 and I always use a slightly longer needle, and I just pull one from my needle book or my pincushion that feels the right thickness. So this would be one that I use for hand piecing, and it's very thin and it bends, whereas this one is a bit thicker and it probably will bend by the end of the quilt. You know, it is already bent. So I just choose one that's a little bit thicker than normal, but I still like a long needle. I've fallen victim to these before, and I always get these. I've got quite a few packets of these. You know, these tiny ones, but those are too small for me. Perhaps if you was doing it in a hoop, they might be a little bit more comfortable. These are the needles that I like to do my hand piecing with. So I think it's about a size 9. I've got those out and I've felt them, and I think it's about those. And just in case anyone asks in the comment, there is a video pattern on this hand sewn needle book, so I'll leave that in the description. So I just do a quilter's knot 3 or 4 times wrapped around, pull that right to the end, and I usually try and pull that knot nice and tight so it pops nice and easy. I need my thimble. So I usually use a leather thimble. I'm going to use my one that's most beat up just because it does get more beaten up. And I also like to use one of these as a grip to pull the needle. I won't wear it in the video because you won't be able to see the needle otherwise, but that will help pull the needle through a little bit easier. So here we are, I'm just hand quilting this. So I'm going around the outside of the star, so I'll do that. So first off, I'm going to rotate the quilt in the direction that I want. And as you can guess, my non-dominant hand is here and I've got a fold, and that helps me grip the quilt. Because without that, I think my quilt would slide everywhere, so I just grip it in between. And that's all that this hand is doing at the moment. So I'm going to pop my knot. I do find this part difficult, popping the knot. Sometimes it leaves pulls on the fabric like that, but I think that will relax and ease up. All I'm doing on the back now, I feel a bit of the needle here, so I'm taking my index finger and I'm just running it along the channel of the needle to make sure I haven't gone through to the back. So I never really flip my quilt over to check the back, but I'm taking my index finger and running it like this to check I can't feel the metal. And if it's fine, I'll pull it through. So now again, I've got my hand holding the quilt. I've obviously got it on the table now, but you can do this on your lap just as easily. And I've now got my middle finger against where I think the stitching line is. So I'm going to come down with my needle. Again, I'm focusing on doing smaller stitches. You can see the length of my stitches there. They're normally probably a little bit bigger than that. And I'm taking my nail on my middle finger and pushing the needle back up, trying to keep my stitches consistent size on the front and the back. Sometimes I prefer the look where the back is smaller, so I'll use my nail to push up more. And then I just pull through. I usually get 3 or 4 stitches on, but where this is, like I said, quite a small area to be quilting, sometimes I'm not able to get as many on my needle because I need to focus on making sure that this is even at the corner where I turn. So I'm going to do one more. Again, I had my middle finger underneath. And then I'm going to rotate the whole thing. So I'll just park my needle in there and just twist. I'm not twisting everything, I'm just twisting the section that I'm working on. So here I haven't loaded another stitch because I need that to travel to that side. So I'll pull through, and again I'm going to take one stitch here but not go through to the back. I'll just travel inside the quilt. You probably know how to do this if you've hand quilted, but again, there where I've travelled, I'm just moving my finger over the needle to make sure I can't feel it. Pull through and rotate again, and just I use this hand all the time to jam it down, and it does ache my finger after a while, but I just go like that and hold the quilt. I hope you can see what I'm doing. I'll try and show from underneath, and again I just stitch like that. So this is an example of a knot that I sometimes get. So all I do is I just pull back and just smooth it out, and the knot just disappears. Whereas sometimes I find that if you pull even harder, you'll just get things more knotted. So they are very easy to undo, these knots on this thread. So you might notice that I don't overly do the rocking motion. I still do. I am rocking slightly, but I don't take every finger off and do that. And I think that's possibly because the quilt isn't taut. It's probably a lot easier to do that technique when the fabric is taut. Yeah, but I don't. I still do push with my middle finger, and that's why I use the thimble. So when it comes to the end, so I've now met where I started doing this quilting. I have got some thread left, and if I could get to somewhere else underneath in between the layers I would do, but I can't on this one. I need to get all the way over there. My needle just wouldn't make it. So I knot off in the same way that I started, but when I make my knot, I'm sorry that I'm using white thread. I know it might be quite difficult to see. When I create my knot, I try and put it a stitch length away from the edge, or a stitch length away from, you know, I hope you can see. So my knot is just there, so that then I'll push that underneath and it will create another stitch. I've generally been knotting 3 times, and you just land them on top of each other. When I'm popping the knot, I generally find it easier to put my needle in the direction that the line of stitches has been travelling. If you try and put it in this way and pull, the thread just for some reason doesn't want to pop as easily. So go in the way that you was travelling. So I've been coming this way, so I'm going to continue. And again, I've put my finger underneath, just checking that my needle's not come through to the other side, and just give a tug, and there we go. And then I pull my thread a little bit tighter, snip, and it will then disappear back inside. So I really hope that you've enjoyed this video and that you found some bits and pieces helpful. Do let me know in the comments if this video would encourage you to have a go at hand quilting, because I know some people are put off by those tiny stitches, and you don't need to do that. As long as it's quilted, that's the main thing, and you can get a look that you like, then that's the main thing. Just your stitches don't even need to be even or straight, it's just whatever you like. So thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye.